Newsflash, America's market is not free, and hasn't been for over 100 years. Welcome to the Wednesday Show, where we dive into whatever issue I decide to talk about. Obviously, today, we're talking about economic regulations. First the question, then the answers. Was FDR the worst president for the economy? Did trust busting help competition? Why are corporations so evil? Why is the minimum wage not a living wage? All these questions and more answered. So let's get right in there. First off, if you ask 1,000 people who their favorite president is, 500 will say Lincoln. After all, it's a safe bet. Then there will be about 200 to 300 that name this list. Either Trump, Obama, Washington, Reagan, JFK, or maybe even Hamilton. The other 195 to 299 will likely point to FDR, leaving 1 to 5 for old Silent Cal. Those that claim FDR inevitably parrot that FDR's New Deal ended the Great Depression. This is falsely attributed at best. In short, he made it worse. But I'm not letting him or you off the hook so easily. Historically, the post-war years are characterized by economic boom, but the economy is also known to look like a roller coaster. So maybe I'll let it slide. However, if you recall, the only time the U.S. debt ever hit zero was after the War of 1812 under President Jackson. Now, perhaps they aren't directly comparable, but FDR definitely prolonged the Great Depression, implementing a string of the most irresponsible economic policies that suggests to me that he knew he was going to die in 1944 and wouldn't be able to answer this question. Are you a socialist or just kind of stupid? He seemed to believe competition was the issue rather than part of the solution. Roosevelt's insistence on forcing wage higher also forced businesses to hire less people. A study conducted by UCLA found that wages often average 25% higher than the most efficient number to keep unemployment down. Of course, this is proven by the 25% decrease in employment compared to where it should have been. If FDR did nothing, let that sink in. If he did nothing, the economy would have worked much better. Whereas, in some sectors, they found the economy to follow economic laws. Who knew forcing wages higher would also make prices rise? Crazy that making unemployed people have to pay higher prices could stall demand, which made the gross national product 27% below where it could have been, where it probably should have been. FDR's New Deal artificially inflated wages and prices, making the hill harder to climb, leaving more people struggling for longer. They estimate that 7 years longer, or 8% of the average lifespan at the time than it needed to. However, it would seem that hatred for competition and artificially stalling the economy runs in the family. I'm talking about everyone's favorite trust buster, Rough Rider, and Teddy Stuffer, Theodore Roosevelt. Now, trust busting is supposed to foster competition, and I will admit that Teddy wasn't actually guilty of misusing the laws, but that doesn't mean that every president was such a beacon of purity. Before Roosevelt, it was more likely for labor unions to be broken up than a monopoly. In other words, they are easily corrupted. We are relying on people who most people agree are bought out to protect the free market. Now, this is a silly idea for obvious reasons, but it also ignores consumer and laborer choice, as well as the separation of market and state. So it stands, these laws are more useful for corrupt politicians than for consumers or laborers that they were designed to protect. I'd even make the not so outrageous, not at all reaching, ever so modest claim that antitrust acts are more useful in protecting monopolies than dismantling them. Those regulations aren't so different than most others in their anti-business face, actually being a simple facade for being pro-kickback, anti-consumer, and anti-labor. Most regulations create a landscape impossible to foster a competitive market. As we can all plainly see, regulating the economy kills small business. Sorry, mom and pops. While only denting corporations' profits enough to force them to send jobs out of the country. Thanks, government. It seems the government has been overcorrecting back and forth on their very first decisions on every single economic issue in American history. Which makes me wonder, maybe they shouldn't have made those decisions in the first place. I mean, they've been searching for balance on issues like these for centuries. 2.5 to be approximate, but I can't help but think neutrality was the answer. As we all know, producer-consumer is roughly the same relationship as labor to boss. In both markets, negotiation is a big piece of the puzzle, which the government doesn't really like. So they'll come up with price floors, and they'll incentivize price ceilings. Thanks to artificial stimuli, they can make us all hate the free market. But I'm sure we all were already aware of this, at least partly, but it does go deeper. The problem is that our government is built on years of overcorrection, caused by fairly small mistakes, I'll give them that, usually over 100 years ago. In closing, FDR was the worst president for the economy. Trust busting was minorly helpful, but far more nefarious than they would want you to think. Corporations are only as evil as they need to be. The government helps with this. And the minimum wage would be a better than living wage if inflation hadn't gone off the rails. Thanks again, overregulation.